The night Claire Whitman chose silence, she didn't know she was changing her life forever. Rain slammed against the windows of the Maple Grove Community Center, loud enough to drown out the last bits of laughter from the fundraiser. Most people had already left, hugging goodbyes, promising to text, rushing back to warm homes. Claire stayed behind, stacking chairs with quick, tired movements. At 13-9, she had learned that staying busy was easier than going home to quiet rooms filled with thoughts she didn't want to hear. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it. She already knew what it would be: friends asking if she was okay. Her sister reminding her she deserved happiness. Someone suggesting she get back out there. Everyone had opinions. Everyone had words. Claire was done with words. That's when she noticed him. At the far end of the room, under flickering fluorescent lights, Evan Brooks sat alone on the floor. He had a small toolbox beside him and a broken donation box in his hands. He worked slowly, carefully, as if nothing else in the world mattered. No headphones. No phone. Just quiet focus. Claire paused without realizing it. Evan had been around the town for years. He volunteered for everything, fixed what others ignored, and slipped out before anyone could thank him properly. People liked him, but no one really talked about him. He didn't compete for attention. He didn't try to impress. He was easy to overlook. And yet, watching him now, Claire felt something shift inside her chest. She walked over, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. "You know you can leave that for tomorrow," she said, trying to sound casual. Evan looked up, surprised, then smiled a soft, polite smile that never asked for anything. "It won't take long," Claire nodded. She stood there longer than necessary, unsure why she hadn't walked away. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the roof like impatient fingers. When Evan finished, he stood and packed his tools. "You want help with the chairs?" he asked. She almost said no. She was used to doing things alone. But instead, she nodded. They worked side by side in silence. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was come. Claire realized how rare that felt. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty. The street lights reflected off the wet ground. Evan walked with her to her car without being asked. "Thanks for staying late," she said, unlocking her door. "No problem," he replied. That was it. No follow-up questions. No expectations. He didn't ask about her day or her life or why she looked tired. He simply wished her a good night and walked away. Claire sat in her car longer than usual, watching him disappear into the rain. Over the next few weeks, Evan became part of her routine without either of them naming it. He showed up early to events. He stayed late. He remembered small things, like how Claire took her coffee with one sugar, or how she preferred the window open even when it was cold. They talked, but not too much. Evan listened more than he spoke. When Claire mentioned her divorce, he didn't react with shock or pity. He didn't ask invasive questions. He let her tell the story at her own pace, even when that pace included long pauses. Her marriage had ended quietly, the way people said was healthy. No shouting, no betrayal anyone could point to. Just years of talking past each other until silence moved in and never left. Her ex-husband had always needed to be right, needed to explain everything, needed to fill every space with words. Claire had once thought that meant love. Now, sitting across from Evan in a small diner after a volunteer shift, she felt something different. He stirred his coffee slowly, waiting for her to finish her thoughts. "I guess I got tired of explaining myself," she said finally. Evan nodded. "That makes sense." It was all. No advice. No judgment. Just understanding. Claire found herself relaxing around him in ways she hadn't with anyone in years. She laughed more easily. She slept better on nights she saw him. The quiet no longer felt empty, it felt shared. Friends noticed. "You spend a lot of time with Evan," her coworker Melissa said one afternoon. "Is something going on?" Claire shrugged. "He's just easy." Easy felt like a gift after years of emotional work. Easy didn't argue. Easy didn't push. Easy didn't leave scars. What Claire didn't admit, even to herself, was why that mattered so much. She was afraid of noise. Afraid of raised voices and strong opinions and emotional demands. afraid that if someone wanted too much from her, she would fail again. Evan never wanted too much. One evening after a town meeting, the power went out. The room fell into sudden darkness, followed by nervous laughter. Someone pulled out a phone flashlight. Evan was beside Claire before she realized it, standing close but not touching. "It'll come back on," he said calmly. Claire felt her heartbeat slow. In that moment, she understood her choice, even if she hadn't made it out loud yet. She was choosing Evan, not because he swept her off her feet, not because he promised forever, but because he felt safe in a way that didn't ask her to change or perform or prove anything. She chose him because he stayed quiet. As weeks turned into months, their bond deepened without ceremony. They shared walks by the river, late-night conversations that drifted between memories and dreams. Evan talked about his love for fixing old things: radios, furniture, broken tools. Claire talked about how she used to paint before life got complicated. Sometimes she noticed Evan watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Not threatening, just honest. As if he saw more than she wanted to show. She ignored it, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging that Evan had feelings, and feelings came with needs. One night after dinner at her place, Evan stood by the door longer than usual. He looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. "Everything okay?" Claire asked. He hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, just tired." She nodded, relieved, and watched him leave. But that night, lying in bed, Claire couldn't sleep. A question echoed in her mind, one she had been avoiding. What happens when quiet people finally speak? The answer came sooner than she expected. A week later, Evan showed up at her apartment unexpectedly. He looked nervous, his usual calm replaced by something fragile. In his hands was a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something," he said. "You don't have to read it now, or ever. I just needed you to have it." Claire took the letter, her chest tightening. "Are you okay?" she asked. He nodded, but his eyes told a different story. "I just didn't want to keep everything inside anymore." After he left, Claire stood alone in her living room, staring at the letter. The silence she loved suddenly felt heavy, uncertain, for the first time. She wondered if she had chosen Evan for the wrong reason. Not because she loved him, but because she believed he would never ask her to listen. And as thunder rolled outside and the room filled with quiet, Claire realized something she had never considered before. Silence could protect her, but it could also break someone else. And the moment she opened that letter, everything she thought she understood was about to change. The letter sat on Claire's kitchen table, folded neatly but heavy with meaning. She stared at it, hands trembling, unsure if she was ready for the truth it carried. Outside, the streetlights reflected off wet pavement from last night's rain, casting long shadows across the quiet apartment. She had thought silence was safe, her shield, her comfort, but now it felt like a test. She unfolded the paper slowly, each crease holding the weight of someone else's heart. Evan's handwriting was precise, careful, almost like him. The words were few, but they landed hard. He didn't fill pages with excuses or explanations. Instead, he wrote about how being quiet had followed him his whole life. How people assumed silence meant weakness or indifference, when really it was a way of observing, of protecting, of loving carefully without causing harm. Claire's chest tightened as she read. She realized she had chosen Evan not for who he truly was, but for the quiet she thought she could control. She had mistaken his patience for absence, his restraint for disinterest. And yet each word on the paper carried a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "I stayed quiet because I thought that's what you needed. But loving you quietly is starting to hurt." Her hands shook as she reread it. Hurt. That was the word she couldn't ignore. Evan had stayed quiet not because he lacked feelings, but because he wanted to protect her, to let her heal, to let her set the pace. She had taken that as a gift, not realizing it had a cost. Claire didn't know how long she sat there staring at the letter. Time seemed to stretch, each minute a reminder of the walls she had built around herself. Finally, she decided she couldn't avoid him. She needed to understand what he meant, and more importantly, she needed to understand what she felt. The next evening, she found him at Lakeside Park. sitting on the same bench where they often shared quiet conversations. The lake mirrored the gray sky above, calm but deep. Evan looked up as she approached, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something raw, vulnerable, and honest. "I read your letter," Claire said softly, sitting beside him. She watched the ripples of water move with the breeze, not wanting to meet his eyes just yet. Evan nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I needed to," she admitted. "I needed to know what you were really feeling." He took a deep breath, his hands resting on his knees. "I've always cared about you, Claire. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to overwhelm you. I thought you needed space, peace, silence. But the truth is, I needed you to hear me too." Claire's throat tightened. She had spent so long protecting herself from words, from feelings, from demands, that she hadn't realized how much she wanted someone to reach her heart anyway. Evan's honesty was not loud or dramatic, but it was intense. Every word carried years of patience, restraint, and longing. "I was afraid," Claire whispered, "after my marriage. I thought love had to be quiet to be safe. I thought if I let someone in fully, I'd lose myself again." Evan turned slightly, finally meeting her gaze. "Love isn't about staying quiet, Claire. It's about staying even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's messy. I wanted to be there for you without making you feel trapped, but I also wanted to be seen, truly seen." Claire felt tears sting her eyes. For the first time, she realized the silence she had relied on was not neutral. It had shaped their relationship in ways she hadn't understood. She had valued quiet, yes, but now she saw it as a kind of cage. She had chosen Evan for the peace he offered, not for the full depth of the man he was. "I don't want you to stay quiet anymore," she said. "I want you to stay honest, even if it scares me." Evan's lips curved into a gentle smile, a mix of relief and hope. He reached for her hand, not pressing, not demanding, just offering presence. "I can do that," he said. "And I want to. I don't want to love you quietly anymore. I want to love you fully." For the first time in months, Claire felt the walls around her heart soften. Silence had been her safety net, but now honesty, truth, and shared vulnerability felt even safer. They didn't speak for a long time, just sat there, hands intertwined, feeling the quiet shift into something new. The kind of quiet that wasn't absence, but connection. Over the following weeks, the relationship began to change subtly but powerfully. They still shared quiet moments, walks by the lake, evenings at the diner, simple laughter. But now the silence was paired with words, truths spoken gently, feelings expressed without fear. Evan shared more of himself, his dreams, his fears, the small stories of his childhood he had never told anyone. Claire responded in kind, letting him into corners of her life she had kept locked after her divorce. She discovered that love wasn't about control or predictability. It wasn't about staying quiet or guarding herself against disappointment. It was about courage, courage to speak, to listen, to feel, and to be seen without masks. And Evan, the man she had chosen for his silence, was teaching her that every day, one rainy afternoon, as they shared coffee at the diner. Claire laughed at something Evan said, a small joke about a broken chair he had fixed at the community center. He laughed too, eyes crinkling at the corners, and she realized something simple and profound. She didn't have to fear his voice. She didn't have to protect herself from him. She could hear him, truly hear him, and still feel safe. Weeks later, as they walked hand in hand along the lakeside at sunset, Evan stopped and looked at her, his expression serious but tender. "I never wanted to be invisible to you," he said. "I just didn't want to overwhelm you. But I also don't want to hold back anymore. I want to share everything with you, Claire, all of it." Claire smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "And I want to listen. I want to hear you, all of you." They stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the sky painted in streaks of orange and pink. The quiet between them was no longer a wall, but a bridge built on trust, honesty, and a willingness to be vulnerable together in that moment. Claire understood that she had learned something essential. Love was never about finding someone who stayed quiet. It was about finding someone who stayed through the silence, through the words, through the fears, and through the hope. Evan leaned close, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "I'll stay," he whispered. "Even when I speak. Even when it's hard. I'll stay." Claire's heart soared. She had chosen him once for silence, but now she was choosing him for so much more, for honesty, for courage, for love that spoke. And as they walked along the lake, hand in hand, the first stars appearing in the sky above, Claire knew that this was only the beginning. The quiet had taught her to be cautious, but love had taught her to leap. And with Evan by her side, she was ready to leap fully, completely, and without fear. Because love, she finally understood, wasn't about avoiding the noise. It was about finding someone whose voice you didn't just hear, but whose words and silence alike could fill your heart with hope, trust, and endless possibility. And in Evan's presence, Claire felt exactly that hope that spoke louder than any silence she had ever chosen. The quiet that had once kept her safe now gave way to something far more powerful, a love that could be seen, felt, and lived. And for Claire, that was more than enough.